Let's go, 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 go. Is everyone there? Okay. Because now we're going to talk about the ethics and the professionalism and the law and the legal side of stuff. And it's actually really interesting and cool. And we know, let me just check I'm all plugged in. Am I all plugged in? Yeah. It's actually really interesting and cool. And we don't have much time for it, so I think we'll overflow. Oh yeah, just like turn around, guys. That's it. We'll finish it later. So we'll flow into we'll finish this in tomorrow's lecture, because I don't think we'll finish it all today. So it seems weird to talk about ethics, but a lot of you are engineers. And those of you that aren't engineers are going to go out and be professionals of one sort or another, and you're going to have to deal with ethics. And it's sort of weird, like, oh, fantastic. It's sort of weird because, who got this?
You did.
Is this my flag? No, someone else got it, didn't they?
Alan, stop being so
Yeah, he got it from Malcolm Turnbull's office.
Well done, you got it from Malcolm Turnbull's office. Oh, good man. Yeah, because he wouldn't give you a national anthem, but he would give you a flag. Oh, he's a subtle man. There's a message in that or something. Thank you very much. That's awesome. Well done. You're Alan, are you?
Apparently.
Okay, thank you, Alan. When I got married, my wife and I spent a long time planning our wedding and the reception and the colour of the napkins and how many flowers to print on the invitation and where the photographer should stand. Oh, God knows how long we spent planning that. Months and months of our life before getting married. And then after we were married and we went home and we said, oh, we're married now, we said, gee, now I'm your husband and you're my wife, and I haven't really thought about what we do beyond here. You know, like, how do we behave towards each other? How should we live our life? How should we structure our finances? How should we deal with issues like trust? What are our values for the children? All that sort of stuff. I thought, oh, isn't that weird? We spent so long talking about this silly ceremony that's over and done with, and we didn't spend any time, as it turns out, talking about the things that are really important. Oh, and then we were going to have our first child. And for weeks and weeks before that, we went to this thing called prenatal classes, where you sit around a room and everyone talks about the birth and the delivery and how you wash the baby when it comes out and how you're supposed to exercise when you're pregnant, all about this stuff. And we just spent hours and you plan like music to play when the baby's coming out, soothing music, and you do special dances that make it less painful. And we spent hours talking and agonising and planning about this. And after the baby was born, Gwen, a gorgeous Gwen, and I'm sitting there and I'm holding her and I think, hang on, now I have to look after a baby for the rest of my life. See, that birth didn't last that long, did it? And now, yeah, it's not in the brochure. Why didn't someone talk about how to be a parent rather than just about how to be someone helping during the delivery? And I think it's weird, but as people, or the HSC. You spend so much of your life studying and thinking about the HSC. You spend all year 11 and 12 planning the HSC and studying and working out how you're going to go in the HSC. And you spend like maybe 20 minutes planning what career you're going to do in the rest of your life after you've done the HSC. The amount of hours you put into planning your career choices are just laughable compared to the amount of hours you put into putting into the HSC. I think it's just a human condition that we look for some keystone moment, some important moment, and we focus everything on that and we think about that and we get so involved with thinking about this big moment, which is a big moment, that we forget that what happens after the big moment is just as important and goes for so much longer. So let me say, at uni, we don't want to do that same thing. We're going to be teaching you about programming, and we're going to be teaching you about how to use C, and about abstraction, and about good style, and about good craftsmanship, and about good science, and about the mathematics of programming, about the design of programming, and the beauty. We'll teach you all you need to know about programming and being a computer scientist and a biomedical engineer and all the things you're going to be. But then you're going to graduate from uni and you're going to go out to your job. And you're going to suddenly think, well, I know all the theory, but heck, I don't know like anything about actually having a job. And it turns out that the places you'll stuff up in having a job and planning the rest of your life is probably more important even to get right than knowing how malloc works or this sort of thing like that. So we give you one fraction of one lecture where we're going to talk about this stuff. And I hope that's enough for you, because you've got to take responsibility yourself now. I hope that's enough for you to start thinking about it yourself. And I hope that by the time you do graduate from uni, that you've given an enormous amount of thought, because it is actually more important than all the technical stuff. The technical stuff's much easier to teach and think and test. But the other stuff's probably more important. So let's start. We're going to talk about ethics, and then we're going to talk about the law, and then we're going to talk about professionalism, and then we're going to talk about risks. Where's risks? It's hiding, but it's there. So we'll talk, and law, and war, torture, and revenge. So we'll spread them over 2 lectures. So ethics. What is ethics? Does anyone know what ethics is? How would you define ethics? Like, let's just start from the basis that none of us are philosophers or moral logicians. So none of us probably are in religious orders. Yes, ethics?
Isn't it something like the way that you treat other people and, I don't know, something like what Dr. Carl said?
It's something about how you treat other people? Yeah, that's a good definition. Well, it's going to be a qualitative thing, so we're going to hunt around for definitions and none will be perfect. Yep.
The way society looks upon certain actions.
The way society looks on certain actions. Yeah. That's a reasonable definition too. Ethics. Think about what you mean. When you think someone's an ethical person, what are you thinking? Yep.
Standards of behaviour.
Standards of behaviour. It's got to do with your behaviour. Yeah, absolutely right. How you behave. Yes.
There you go for all Australians.
A fair go for all Australians. Hard-working, decent Aussies.
Yes.
Yeah. Fair go for all Australians is ethics. That's right. Thank you. Mateship. Hard-working. None of that intellectual elite. No questioning. Okay. I heard an ethicist speak once. There's lots of ethicists around. They're really cool. And one of the people, though this isn't the person I heard speak, has anyone heard of the St James Ethics Centre? There's a guy, Martin Longstaff or Simon Longstaff or something like that runs this. You should Google them and check them up and find out all about them. I assume they've got a web presence. They're really cool. They operate in Sydney to provide ethical advice to various people, and they're really cool. And the guy from there, every time I hear him speak on the radio, he's so wise. I think, I want to be like him to my children. But anyway. So I heard someone talk about it, and it might have been him. That's the reason I mentioned him. That they said ethics is what you do, how you behave, when no one's looking. So when no one knows how you behave, and there's no benefit to you for behaving one way or another, how do you behave? So if the exam questions were sitting here and you were alone in the room with me and I walked out and no one will ever know if you looked at the exam questions, would you look at them?
Yes.
If your girlfriend has a diary and you know she doesn't want you to read it and you find the diary and she's not around. If you're working in a bank and someone makes a mistake with the change and you know there's $50 too much sitting on the counter, does it go into the till? Does it go into your pocket? These sorts of things are what I think of as ethics. They're how you behave when you're not compelled to behave in any particular way and you just choose to behave. Yes?
And why does the internet have no ethics?
Why does the internet have no ethics? Because there's nowhere on the internet that Google's not watching you. So by definition, ethics doesn't apply. No, I think the internet actually has lots of ethics.
It's just most places on the internet.
Yeah.
People without
Yeah. I think most people that act on the internet behave incredibly ethically. They just have a different set of ethics maybe to conventional people. But I mean, we find that in security course. The kids that do hacking and cracking and breaking into stuff and doing all sorts of bad, naughty things on the internet, I'm talking about the kids who do it here or the individual civilians. I'm not talking about organised crime doing it. Those people tend to be incredibly ethical people. They just have a different set of standards to society's standards. But nonetheless, ethics is when you don't just act in your self-interest, but you act how you think you should act. Now, I heard someone give a talk on ethics once for the software engineers. Ken Robinson organised a philosopher, a moral philosopher, to come in and talk about ethics. And I snuck up to the back of the lecture. And he said, he was talking about a study. Yeah, they say, studies show. Okay, I have no references on this. And he said, what happens is, you might think that what's ethical and what's moral and what's correct varies from place to place. And he said, there is some study, here we go, I don't know the study, that they did in lots of countries. You're free to discount everything I say now because I can't actually cite it. And if you can cite it, please tell me the citation so I know. And they asked people in different countries to write down what they thought an ethical person was, a good person, a moral person, the sort of person they would like to be. What qualities do you think a good person has? What are the qualities of being good, of being ethical? Yeah, I don't know how they phrase it exactly. And people wrote down a list of attributes that they thought an ethical person would have. And at this point in the lecture, the guy said, all right, everyone, I want you all to write down a list of 10 things that you think an ethical person would have. What it means to be a good person for you. And we all did that. And then he said, now the interesting thing was that in every single country, when they ripped them out and showed all these rankings of attributes, there was incredible similarity, regardless of whether it was a third world struggling African country, a corrupt, despotic Asian regime, a hopeless, greedy Australian middle-class suburb, you know, whatever, wherever it was from anywhere, everyone ranked the same, no matter whether it's Hindu or Buddhist or atheist or whatever, everyone ranked the same set of qualities and in a very similar order. And he said, you know, what always comes top, and I reckon if you guys have done this exercise now, you may well have written this thing first, is the very most important quality people think that an ethical person has is honesty. Not telling lies. Telling the truth. And then there was a series of other qualities underneath. But it completely blew me away that everywhere in the world, in China, in Hong Kong, Singapore, in India, in America, in Sweden, in Scandinavia, Kuala Lumpur, Tanzania, Saudi Arabia, Sydney, Melbourne, Dapto, Wagga. No matter where you go, everyone, not everyone, but there's this predominantly thing. So I think we have, what the philosopher was trying to say was, he thinks that everyone has a strong internal moral compass. Everyone has a reasonably good idea of what it means to be a good person. And we sort of know this already, and it's just sort of part of being a person, which I thought was an interesting idea. So what I wanted to say to you about ethics, and you might think, well, what the heck does ethics have to do with computing, is I believe that when you go out into the workforce, you will constantly, and probably already are now, but certainly more so when you're in the workforce, you'll constantly be in situations where you're placed in a position of trust or where you're not under direct observation, where you're just expected to do the right thing or people hope you do the right thing or whatever. And as you get older, you have more and more autonomy and more ability to do whatever you want. And I believe that we all inside us actually have the same set of ideas about what it means to be a good person. And we all sort of want to do that. And when I'm intrigued by people like Hitler, you know, the classic counterexample. And in fact, did I tell you before, when I was about your age, I went to Sydney Uni Library. They have an enormous stack there in the Fisher Library. And you can just go there and just read books until your ears pop off your head, which is an odd way of reading. And I just suddenly, for some reason, became fascinated with the concept of the Hitler Youth. Now, Hitler Youth were all the young boys and girls in Germany in the wartime, you know, I guess in the Weimar Republic at the end and then during the war, who were spying on their parents for the Nazis, who did horrible atrocities, and, you know, they were like boy, girls and scouts, and they wore little uniforms and they did all this stuff. And yet they were just normal people. I really believe everyone's a normal people. Even Hitler's a normal person. So they have the same set of values as everyone, but they were doing these repulsive things. And I thought, gee, how could human beings do such repulsive things? So I used to, because there's a whole lot of documented cases of these people when they got older, reflecting back on what they'd done. Germans who were in the Hitler Youth saying why I did this and what I think about it now. And I was just fascinated reading about them. And because reading, they were all just normal people. They were just like me. And they'd been put in terrible situations. They'd been exposed to various temptations and threats and conditionings and various things. And they'd made choices that they now were deeply ashamed about. So why am I talking about this? I think as you go through life, you have the ability to choose a whole lot of things. And if you choose to do the things that are consistent with your beliefs, you will feel self-confident and proud, and you'll feel positive about being alive, and you'll feel valid and valued and validated, and you will have a happy life, and you'll And if you do things that you're secretly ashamed of, that you think are not the right thing to do, that these things, I think, diminish us in some ways and make us sad and depressed. And I don't want you to do that. So what I'm doing now is I would like to encourage everyone to work out what your values are, and I don't really care what they are. In fact, I certainly don't care what they are. But work out whatever they are, because there'll be something for you. And then bloody hell, make sure you stick to your values. Now, your values you might think software piracy is bad. So just never do it. You might think that Disney's an evil, corrupt corporation. In which case, never stop doing software piracy. I don't mind which you do, but I think it's really important that you work out what you think is right and wrong and you stick to it. Because it destroys your self if you do the wrong thing. And I think you don't want to grow up being deeply ashamed or looking back. I can remember several instances in my life where I've done the wrong thing. And if I could go back now, I would do anything to fix those things up and not have done those things. I'm deeply ashamed that I did them. And I just think you should go through life and always try and do the right thing. And look, let me give you an example. The government, bless their hearts, have this useful piece of legislation where if you want to get a tax deduction on a car that you use on a lease, if your car is tax deductible, then you have to drive it a certain number of kilometres. And if you don't drive it a certain number of kilometres in the year, you get actually tax penalties. And I'm an environmentalist, and I have a piece of land that I'm trying to environmentally revegetate, and I have a car that I use to get out there. It's a special car that only that car can get out there. And it's on a lease, so I can make it tax deductible. And I'm doing all this environmental work and agricultural work and various other things. And it came up to the time of year when you had to fill in your tax return. And I had to just say how many kilometres I'd driven the car. And I thought, oh, bugger, I haven't driven it enough. Because whenever possible, I don't drive it, because I think driving's not a good thing to do. I thought, oh, bugger, oh, I haven't driven it enough. Oh, no, now I'm going to have to pay like 10 grand for tax. If I'd driven it like 1,000 kilometres more over the year, I'd get like $1,000 back on my tax. Like 10 grand pay, $1,000 back. I just had to drive it 1,000 more kilometres. Oh. And I just had to ring up the uni and tell them how many kilometres I did. And I went, and I rang up, oh, hi, it's Richard here. I'm just reporting my annual kilometerage. Yes, I did about 21,000 kilometres. And he said, oh, what's the exact thing? And I said, oh, I can't remember. It's about 21,000, because I believe you shouldn't ever lie. And I didn't want to lie. And he said, well, I need to know the exact number. Can you go and look it up? And I said, okay, I'll call you back tomorrow. And I tossed and turned that night, and I spoke to my wife, and I said, okay, I'm going to have to pay stupid $10,000 because I didn't pollute enough in this year, or I can get $1,000 back. It's no skin off anyone's nose. I just have to tell one little white lie. It doesn't hurt. And I just agonised all night. And then the next day I said to my wife, well, I hate this government. I hate our tax regime. And I hate everything about it. There's no way they're going to make me into a liar. So I rang up the man and said, oh, it was $19,000. Okay, and it cost us a lot of money. But I'm not setting this up as an example of me being good, because I actually did attempt to lie to him first. And thank heavens he insisted I gave him the exact number, because I would have lied. So that was one chance where I think I escaped. And your set of values might be it's okay to lie to the government and save $10,000. And that's absolutely fine. But I'm so glad I didn't do it. So my advice, the whole thing about ethics that I want to tell you is I'm no person to tell you what's right and wrong, but I do know that you know what's right and wrong for you. And my advice to you is this. Work out what you think is right and wrong, and plan in advance where you think your temptations are going to come. And work out how you're going to deal with these situations. Because I find whenever an ethical dilemma pops up in front of me, it's something I probably could have anticipated was going to happen. And if it's just left to me to work out how to resolve this dilemma, I'm a lazy, greedy, selfish, dishonest person. I'm a human being. So on the spur of the moment, I'll probably do the wrong thing. What would happen if the Titanic was sinking and there was a boat there and there was this little kid and there was me and there's one spot in the, I often think about this. I mean, how would you act? Yeah. Eat the kid. I like the way you think. And I reckon that if I knew the Titanic was going to sink a week in advance and I had time to think about it, then I would do the right thing. Hopefully, I would do the right thing at that time. And I reckon if it was happening and it was chaos all around me, I might do the greedy, selfish thing without thinking. I hope I wouldn't, but I might. So my advice is this. Long-winded way of getting to the advice. Work out what moral dilemmas lie in front of you. They're not hard to anticipate what they're going to be. And think about them in advance. And then when you're thrown into the position of having to make the decision, you've thought about it and you make a decision that you've thought about rather than your instinctive decision, which might not be the right one. So that's really all I want to say about ethics is there's going to be lots of temptations in your career and in the rest of your life. You do not want to disappoint yourself. You want to be a good example to your kids. You do not want to be ashamed of what you've done.
How do we write that in C?
How do you write that in C? Well, temptations like temp. It's the same in C. You know when you're writing a C program what you should do, and there's always that little voice whispering, write the comments later. You can make that variable shorter. No one's ever going to look at this code. Have an unstructured exit. It's okay. You know that. You know. Yeah, okay. So that's my fatherly advice, is anticipate your dilemmas and think about them. And I have spoken with graduates. In fact, long before I was a lecturer, I was speaking with a girl who was a computer science graduate who's working as a programmer. And I was talking to her at a party, and she was really upset because her boss had put her in this situation where she was a technical person in a company trying to sell a product, and she was along there at a meeting with a client, and the boss had said, our software can do this, and next version that's coming out in a week's time will be able to do that. Isn't that right, Thelma? And it wasn't right. It wasn't true. Their software was stuffed. They had all sorts of problems. There was no way the next version was going to come out on time. It wasn't going to have those features. But on the spur of the moment, the boss is staring at her. She knows what he wanted her to say. So she said, oh, yeah. And then afterwards, she was so cross. And then he starts taking to meetings all the time. And he's always getting her now to lie to the clients about what the next version of the software is going to think. And she's just in trauma, and she's distraught, and she's unhappy, and she's saying, my job is just lying to people now, and the people are unhappy, and my expertise is in computing. It's not in being a marketer, and why am I doing all that? And I could just sense that really it was a slippery slope, and that she'd sort of just, I don't think she was thinking about it at all. I think she was just unhappy. And I think if she'd taken a step back and thought about what she was doing, she'd have realised that it wasn't right for her, and she'd have spoken to her boss about it, and she'd have changed it in some way. And the only advice I gave to her at that time, which actually wasn't completely terrible advice, but it certainly wasn't as good as it could have been, was I said, well, you know you're not alone. It sounds like you're trying to go through all this crisis yourself alone. And it's very hard to work out how to behave when everyone around you is behaving in the wrong way. So I think what you should do is seek out other professionals and talk to them. And certainly, you guys will all be professionals, and that's our next slide. If you're an engineer, you'll be a member of the Engineers Australia. If you're a health professional, you'll be part of somebody. There'll be of AMA? Yeah, the AMA, for example. Whoever you are, you'll be part of a body of professionals. You should make contacts in that body and talk to other people. And when you have a dilemma from your boss, you should have professional friends you can talk to about it. And you should just have, you just talk to your friends, talk to your parents, talk to everyone around you. So I think moral dilemmas are very hard to deal with. My advice is always gather as much information as you can, seek as much advice as you can. So that's what I told her. I said, you should talk to lots of people and don't try and do this alone because it's too hard to. Like, for example, it must have been like that with Hitler. I'm sorry to keep going back to Hitler, but, I could just imagine he says, take that person and put them in the gas chamber. And you're the guard and you go, oh, I don't think that's right. And all the other guards are taking the people and putting them in the gas chamber, and everyone around you is doing it, and no one's questioning it. Everyone's doing it, and you think, oh, I guess I've got to do it. And it would be really hard to say no when everyone around you is doing it. What's that? What's that? You'd probably get killed. That's right. But, the thing is, every guard's probably inside thinking that's not right. Hitler's sort of pulling off a scam. Probably if one guard said, no, I'm not going to do it, and then Hitler would say, guard, kill that guard for not doing it. And maybe that guard would say, no, actually, I don't want to do that. And what would happen if everyone just said, nah? See, Hitler's just one man. Yeah. What's he going to do? Hit you? What's that?
What would have happened if Hitler had tried Australia? Nah, she'll be right.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, so I certainly think looking to others is a really good thing to do and seeking strength. Now, the last thing about ethics I wanted to talk about is whistleblowing. You might be in a position where you're observing something happening in your work environment that you're not happy about, and that you're in fact deeply unhappy about, and you think is wrong. Like, for example, maybe you're, maybe you're writing Windows. Yeah, but maybe you're observing some form of corruption, or you're observing someone breaking the law, or your company's doing something wrong or unethical, and it's going to have implications. Maybe it's about asbestos on people, or you're pouring pollution into a river, or whatever. There are all these examples of people in organisations who are otherwise completely normal, honest people, but the organisation's doing something. It's very hard to question it. Now, if you do question it, you are called, if you make it public, what you do is you go to the boss and you say, not happy, and the boss says, yeah, we'll fix it up, and nothing happens. And so you escalate it internally and nothing happens. At some point, people in this situation contemplate something called whistleblowing. And whistleblowing is when you make it public. You say, I can't trust the company to fix it up. I'm going to talk about it publicly. And that's called a whistleblower. Now, being a whistleblower is a very difficult thing to do and a very brave thing to do. So I was going to encourage you, if you're ever in a position of needing to be a whistleblower, there's a very good book by a guy I believe called Brian Martin called The Whistleblower's Handbook, which you should get and read before you ever be a whistleblower. Because being a whistleblower, and one of my wife's friends was in a company that was behaving acting in a legal way, and she tried to escalate in the company and they ignored it, and she toyed with the idea of being a whistleblower. And she got this book and read it. And it's a very sobering book because generally, if you try and be a whistleblower, there's various things that the company will do to discredit you, or the government say. They'll say you're a lunatic, or that you have mental problems, or you have vested interests, or you're lying. There's these standard attacks, and it's very nasty and personal. And there's ways you can protect yourself and so on and so on. So I wouldn't ever suggest anyone be a whistleblower without thinking about it very carefully, because it is a way of pain. But you might think it's the right thing to do and insist that you want to be one, in which case do make sure you read the Whistleblower's Handbook, which at least will tell you the pitfalls and attacks that they'll do and so on. Has anyone read the Whistleblower's Handbook? No. Well, see, you should all, I think everyone should really read that book. Yes?
Yeah, there's a WikiLeaks, a website which is basically set up to allow people, if they want to whistleblow, send stuff in anonymously and get a person on the phone.
Ah, cool. But whistleblowers can think they're doing it anonymously, but like that guy that committed suicide in Britain that whistleblew on Tony Blair's lying about weapons of mass destruction, or Andrew Wilkie. Oh, did he do it? I don't think he did it anonymously. There are famous people that have whistleblown. But yeah, can you post a link for that? So, but you just want to think about the implications of whistleblowing and just be really careful, because it can tear your whole life up. But sometimes it's the right thing to do. Tricky, tricky, tricky. Ethics. You're going to be faced with ethical dilemmas as well as writing C code. Please be prepared for both. Okay? Be prepared is my one piece of advice. Now the law, I did want to talk about the law briefly, but we've only got 15 minutes. Oh, well, let me talk about the law, and we'll talk about professionalism tomorrow. We don't have much as computer scientists to do with the law. There's a bit of contract law and employment law and various secrecy, anti-terrorism laws and various things like that. Okay, there's bits and pieces like that. But generally, our biggest dilemma with the law is copyright and intellectual property. So I think any computing professional needs to know about, to be a well-operating professional, you need to know about intellectual property and intellectual property law in Australia and in other countries. And I encourage you to learn and read and research about it. There's a couple of things I wanted to talk about intellectual property law about. Intellectual property is not like real property. It's not like I own this bag, it's mine. Intellectual property is sort of more like saying I own this idea. And of course the thing about the bag is if you take my bag, I don't have my bag. If you take my idea, I've still got my idea. Okay, it's diminished, but it's not. Okay, so there's this sort of difference between the two. Nonetheless, it's regarded as property law. Now, what are the reasons for intellectual property? Why would it be that you can't use other people's ideas without paying them money?
You put a lot of effort into it.
They put a lot of effort into coming up with the ideas. If they put a lot of effort into coming up with the ideas and then everyone else could just use them without paying them any money, there's no incentive to come up with the ideas. Unless they're independently wealthy, how can they survive or live or flourish? So the creation of artistic works, copyright's normally just for artistic works, but bizarrely enough that includes computer programs and Disney movies. Anything that's created. Yeah. But in a sense, everything's created. Washing machines are created.
Well, no, washing machines just perform a task.
Yeah.
You actually have to apply thought to something that's creative.
Yeah, if you have to apply thought to something that's creative, or Disney movies. Now, can I just say that the copyright law is brought in for that very reason. In the old days in England, people used to write pamphlets about their opinions about stuff, or they'd write books. And then rival printers would take the pamphlet and they'd sell them on the street for like a shillings or a farthing or a bun or a boil or something like that. And rival people would come and take them to their own publishers, print them off quickly and flood that publication out themselves, but not give the author any money. And it really pissed people off that wanted to write pamphlets and publications and things. So they passed a law to encourage creativity and promotion, saying if you wrote something, then no one was allowed to copy it for some period of time, like a week or 2 weeks or 10 weeks or something like that. It was realised it was in the public good after a while that the work could be copied and passed around. We didn't want to keep ideas locked away and hidden. Mankind works by sharing ideas. Yeah. All the maths you've ever learnt worked because one mathematician did a bit, another mathematician built on it, another mathematician built on that. If no mathematician can use your idea without getting your permission and paying you money, he probably won't be able to build on it, and he won't be able to build on that, and things are locked down. So there's this trade-off between the public good, which is sharing information as much as possible, and reward and incentive for the creator, which is copyright. So the original idea was things would be protected for some period of time, and then after that they'd move into something called the public domain. Has anyone ever heard of that? Yeah, okay. And then, bizarrely enough, and then it's oscillated backwards and forwards over time, the amount of time that things would be protected before they fell into the public domain. But over recent years, there's been an interesting trend that the amount of time it takes for a work to fall into the public domain increases and increases. So it used to be the life of the author. The whole time the author was alive, you couldn't use their ideas, but when they were dead, you could. And then someone thought, oh, what about the author's widow? Because authors are always men and they die early. Perhaps. Or what about the widow's, the author's family? They should be compensated for a bit longer. So then it was life of the author plus 10 years. Or life of the author plus 20 years. And in Australia, it even grew to life of the author plus 50 years. Well, it did, yeah. It grew to 50. And then in the US, Walt Disney Corporation realised that Mickey Mouse was just about to fall out of copyright. The very earliest Mickey Mouse movie would have fallen out of copyright in 2004, and actually did fall out of copyright in Australia. And so they said, we should be able to extend this period of life of the author plus 50 years. We'd like to extend it to life of the author plus 70 years. And we'd like it to be generally understood that every 10 years after that, we can continually extend it. So nothing ever falls into the public domain again. And a whole lot of very sus activities happened, and that law was passed. And it's called the Sonny Bono Copyright Extension Act. We were protected from it in Australia until our really brilliant Minister for Trade, Mark Vaile, passed the Free Trade Agreement. Wonderful. Which meant we picked up all America's copyright laws, and now we're stuck with that too. So yeah, now what is public domain? That's work that can be freely copied. Here are some works that were in the public domain. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Cinderella, Pinocchio, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Alice in Wonderland, The Jungle Book. Do you recognise all these stories? You might have even seen cartoons of these stories. Has anyone ever seen cartoons of the stories? Yep. In fact, The Jungle Book was released by Disney 1 year after it fell into the public domain. So Disney's taken a lot of things from the public domain, but Disney's current approach is that nothing shall ever re-enter the public domain. So none of Disney stuff will ever enter the company. Now, this is because Disney makes an annual profit of, in 2005, $4.1 billion. 2006, $5.5 billion. 2007, $6.8 billion. So were you to not pay them $30 to watch one of their DVDs, that would be outrageous. So I hope you can see that without copyright, it would be no good. Now, there's a little legal thing I have to show you about copyright. Okay, and let me say one last thing. My brother does medical research, and he was speaking at a conference, and he was doing some work on something that was leading to regeneration of the nerves in the spinal column, which could have effects with people who have, paralysed and all sorts of things like that. Because it's well known that the nerves in the nose can regrow, but certain other nerves can't. And the nerves in the nose, the olfactory nerve, grows really quickly. So he was looking at ways of fooling around with that. And he was at this conference, and someone else from another country is also working on a similar thing. And he was trying one technique, and someone from another country who was interested in similar stuff said to them, oh, how's that going, your work in this, thing? And he said, oh, it's not going so well. We're probably going to abandon that and do something else. And he came back and told me, and he was really upset. He said, oh, I told them a lie because we want to finish the treatment first and get a patent on it before anyone else can. So I told a lie. And I said to him, this is what science is all about. It's about us all sharing ideas so as quickly as possible we can heal nerve damage. It's not about some pharmaceutical company making $1 billion trillion. And he said, yeah, it's really unhappy. And he wasn't happy about that. So I put it to you that intellectual property, while it is good to reward authors with little bits of money, there's certainly two sides to it. So I would hope that as computer scientists, you guys are going to go out there, and if anyone does, you guys are going to agitate for changes in copyright and intellectual property law. Because we have a big vested interest because it affects us the most, I'd say. Okay, that's all I wanted to say about the law, and encourage you to learn about copyright law. And we will debate a bit about it in Tutes this week too. I'll see you on Wednesday.